Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the 16th edition of Better AI Meetup here in Bratislava. Today we'll have a special double edition of Better AI Meetup, actually. In the second half of the evening, we will be talking to the finalists of the second AI Awards, which are awarded for doing trustworthy AI solutions and products to Slovak entrepreneurs. And in the first half of the evening, we will be talking to Martin Husovec, the Associate Professor of Law at London School of Economics, about the Digital Services Act. Now, as usual, the Better AI Meetup is brought to you by Kinit, Innovatrix, and Slovak AI, which is a support of Slovak diaspora. And Martin Husovec is, of course, part of Slovak diaspora as well, and we are very glad to have him here. And as usual, we have lots of AI researchers, AI enthusiasts, data scientists here, which is normal, which is not normal. I see a lot of lawyers here, which makes me a bit nervous, you know, but I think that's natural, as always. And I will be welcoming one of lawyers here on stage. Martin Husovec, please welcome and tell us about how we should take into account Digital Services Act when we are doing basically anything with AI in Europe.
Okay. So, hello everyone. Good to see many of you. Welcome. Good to see familiar faces. So I figured it's great that I speak in English today because you won't hear my accent in Slovak, obviously, which is accent from the east, and you will be able to understand me and follow me much better. When Maria asked me to present today, I thought, what could I present on the topic of AI, and the obvious candidate is something I've been working on a lot recently, and that is the Digital Services Act, which, quite surprisingly, initially didn't have a big AI focus, but I think increasingly, as you will see, there are many tools that can be quite heavily used going forward, and perhaps can actually become, given all what is happening with the AI Act, quite potent tool. So let's frame the debate first. Obviously, you come across all these different stories. AI means different things to different people. But what I mean by AI today, when I'll be talking about these different tools, services, and features, I think about stories like this. The fact that Snapchat launches an AI chatbot that chats with teens and children in general, and that creates all kinds of problems. The fact that Google introduces its AI overviews that recommend you to eat at least 1 rock a day, according to the scientists from the UC Berkeley. The fact that you have people dying or crashing their cars because they use navigation from Google Maps, or more sad stories such as when minors die because they get too attached to AI chatbots. And so I'd like to look at all of these stories on a high level. I'd like to tell you a little bit about what Digital Services Act is for, what it actually captures, what it can deliver, and what it cannot deliver. So first of all, DSA, this stands for Digital Services Act, which is a new regulation that was adopted in 2022. It went very quickly through the legislative process during COVID times. And what I'd like to tell you first is a little bit about the purpose of the DSA, then tell you a little bit about how AI is covered by it or not, and then finally to give you some sense of consequences. So first of all, what is DSA? What is the DSA really about? This is my favorite visual to explain this, where I basically say, look, if you look at the last 20 years, what you have observed is that private companies on the very right have accumulated a lot of power, both in terms of financial muscle, as well as in terms of the power over individual, thanks to the popularity of their services, which led to certain recalibration of power. State was able to control individuals better before, now is losing towards private companies, but also individuals are sometimes losing the agency in favor of the private companies. So the way to think about a law like DSA is to think of it as an attempt to recalibrate part of that. and recalibrate it, not necessarily by giving all of that power to the state, which is what some countries do, and they call it Digital Services Act. There are some countries in Asia, they do that, but they usually invent something like a board of people who will decide what content is harmful in a country, which is obviously not what we have in mind when we think of recalibration of power. But we try to recalibrate it by bringing it closer to individual. So we impose regulation on private companies so that individual has more agency, has more ability to contest decisions of these individual companies, and is able to maybe adjust its own user experience more than it was the case before. And inevitably, you're making the state stronger because you do it through the law, and law empowers the state. So if you think about what a DSA does, so none of what I said usually you would tell to someone who asks you about what a DSA really is, but that's what I think really it is a recalibration tool. You would talk about more practical things, like DSA is about content moderation, it's about how the content disputes on platforms take place, how they're explained, whether you have some due process, how the risks on the platform are managed, how do you design these services, how do you think about certain stakeholder groups like minors, how do you mitigate risks, and finally, all accompanied with transparency. So how do you report about all of these things that you do and allow researchers to study you? So DSA is all of that, but if you will see when we apply it to specific case like AI here, it can actually bring some interesting results and potentially points of leverage for the regulators. So first of all, I need to bore you a little bit with the structure of the DSA, because this is what will be key for understanding what the DSA can do for you and what it cannot do. So DSA has this sort of a layered structure, like a cake. The cherry at the bottom are the big players, which we call in our lingo VLOPs or VLOSs, which stands for very large online platforms or very large search engines, online search engines. And the very top obligations here will be most consequential for AI. That's a little bit of a spoiler. However, we will have some obligations also in this tier, and as you will see also in this tier, potentially applicable to all services in the ecosystem. So this layered structure, which I'm not going to explain in detail, tells you two things. First of all, the difference between this area and this area is the size of the company or the number of users. If you're tiny, meaning you have less than 50 employees or 10 million euros turnover or less than 45 million users, you will only get very few obligations here. If you have this scale, then more obligations will apply to you, and those obligations will be then dosed depending on what service you are providing. Okay, so these are different descriptions of services, which you don't have to understand for the purpose of this presentation. So what does all of this, what do these layers mean for AI? Well, we have to first be more specific about that. So what AI are we talking about? First of all, DSA in some sense deals with AI by definition, because content moderation systems, in order to operate on scale, of course, are AI systems. So to that extent, all the content moderation systems that are AI systems are definitely regulated by the DSA. In fact, the very idea of imposing all the procedural obligations, the legal scaffolding around the decision-making of companies about content, the accounts, what gets removed, demonetized, blocked, all of it is something that is in the remit of the DSA, and DSA has a lot to say about it because it imposes procedural safeguards on all of these tools. But obviously, that's not what people think of when they pose this question. They mostly think of two things, and I split it here for the purpose of presentation as a feature and service. So mostly they think of features of services that are consumer-facing, such as recommender systems on these services, which are obviously AI-powered. So this could be news feeds, this could be recommender systems for the friends, this could be recommender systems for other things, or post-ChatGPT launch, they probably also might think of AI chatbots. So chatbots that are AI-powered and are supposed to perform some conversations or some functions within the service. In addition to that, another way how to look at it is when you are looking at AI as a service. So here the framing example I'm going to use is the AI search chatbots like ChatGPT that function as a chatbot but also allow you to search the web on the way, and that will have consequences, as you will see. So first of all, let's look at the first example, which is what most people don't mean by AI when they look at the DSA, and that is the content moderation. So content moderation, again, to the extent content moderation is conducted through AI system, which is inevitable given the scale on most of the bigger services, one of the key obligations that I think applies across the board is the transparency obligation from Article 15, which only applies to companies that are at least mid-sized and provide one of the intermediary services. So mid-size is defined as 50 FTEs or 10 million euros turnover in the previous year. And if you're that company and provide a regulated service, which I'm going to show you the examples of in a second, then you're under obligation to do the following: issue an annual report where, among other things, you explain your content moderation system as well as a qualitative description, a specification of the precise purposes for which you're using it, indications of accuracy and a possible rate of errors of the automated systems, and possible safeguards that you're using. In other words, if you have hate speech detection tool, if you have a spam filtering tool as a webmail provider, those are obviously all content moderation tools. To the extent that the law applies, you have an obligation to explain what tools you're using, for what purpose, and explain the precision rate, the error rate, and what safeguards do you apply so that the tool is actually doing a good job. This is very consequential. I can tell you for sure this is a provision that has a lot of potential to ruffle many feathers, and it's not being complied with yet by many, even big services. But you know, if you look at the language, there's no particular reason. So if you look at the ecosystem of services, all the services in a bubble here are intermediary services. To the extent they are operated by a mid-sized company, they are in the scope and they have to issue such a report and explain how they conduct content moderation and those tools and report on the error rates as well as the safeguards they're using. So think of all these different tools and think of all the small tools, not just the big ones. And of course, the scale is pretty big. So I think transparency can actually deliver quite a lot. And this can potentially change the ecosystem for these tools, because obviously if you are, I don't know, if you are Cloudflare, a CDN service, and you're using some tool that detects child sexual abuse material for its clients, obviously you haven't developed it always in-house. Most likely you haven't. Which means that the only way to comply with that obligation is to pass it on to the developer of that tool, to the vendor, which basically means that this travels in the supply chain to the developers. So that's one important consequence. Second important consequence is, let's now look at the big guys. The big guys, to the extent that you qualify because you have 45 million monthly active users, Commission has designated you as one of the VLOPs, which is the companies here on the list, or the services here on the list, you will get special obligations, which I'm going to explain in a second. And if you are in that category, essentially any part of your product, regardless whether that's AI or whatever else is your back-end operations, is part of the risk surface. It's part of the things that you have to think about. So any AI feature that is embedded into a very large online platform, to the extent that it impacts some fundamental rights, is essentially something you have to think about. So I repeat that. Any AI feature embedded into a service that is designated as a very large online platform will have to be tested on the risks for fundamental rights. And that's highly consequential. That essentially means any AI plugged into YouTube, into Pornhub, Booking, Amazon, Zalando, all of these tools, Google Maps, all of those have to be subject to the risk assessment, and a few other obligations, as you will see. Now, obviously, it's not that we regulate the AI, the technology, the model, but we regulate its application when it's embedded into the final product. Because DSA is essentially regulating the product, not the technology. But obviously, through product, it's in a way regulating technology. So that's the big guys, and I will come back to them. But I think there's something in store also for these guys, and that is regular platforms, meaning platforms that aren't as big to end up on this list that you have seen here. And there are many of them. There are thousands of them, in fact, in Europe. This could be social media sites, adult sites, marketplaces, discussion forums, review sites, dating apps, all kinds of things. These services don't have as extensive obligations, but again, to the extent they embed in the service features that includes AI, they will have to think about the impact on pre-selected constituencies. Those are minors, misleading consumers, and then the question of transparency. So minors, the reason for this, because we have one provision in DSA that applies to all online platforms that are accessible to minors, which essentially requires quite heavily to think about the interests of minors, meaning that if you have an AI system embedded into a platform that isn't this big, essentially minors is your first concern. And a second order concern is whether you are misleading consumers, which should have been your concern anyway, but you know, here DSA doubles down on some of the other pre-existing law. And finally, the interesting bit is transparency. And that is because transparency is something that we have in a DSA as a universal antidote to the problems we don't know how to solve. So how do you solve a problem you don't know how to solve? Well, let's create more data so we can potentially do something about it next time around. So to illustrate this, imagine a situation like this. You are Snapchat. Snapchat is designated as a VLOP, a very large online platform. You don't have an AI, but then suddenly you introduce AI, a chatbot for minors. That immediately means that you have to do the risk assessment, as you will see, for this particular feature, and it will trigger some consequences if you don't do that. If this wouldn't be introduced by Snapchat, by some other service, you wouldn't have the obligation to think about all possible risks, but you have an obligation to think about a subset of risks to minors at the very least and consumers. So that would be the difference, unless you are very small, meaning you're not even a mid-sized company, in which case you wouldn't have to do a thing. Now finally, I see that I only have 4 minutes left. I think that this one is probably most surprising to many, including myself. When DSA was adopted, people haven't thought about AI as a service. So obviously we haven't thought of ChatGPT because that wasn't around at the time when this was drafted. So we haven't thought of AI-powered chatbots, certainly not with search functions. So when the DSA was adopted, essentially we had the two categories of services. We had online platforms and search engines. Online platforms are services that store users' information and distribute it to the public as a main feature. And search engines, which were supposed to be what? Well, search engines, right? Generalist search engines, not a specialized search engines, not meta search engines. Okay, so far so good. Except when we drafted the definition in hindsight actually includes way more than just generalist search engines. And it includes way more to the extent that even OpenAI itself now admits that actually probably it is a search engine according to the definition of the DSA. And it recently disclosed, as it has to, that it has 41 million monthly active users in the EU, which basically tells you that in the next reporting window, they likely step over the 45 million threshold, meaning they will then be designated as a search engine. Why is that? Well, it's because the definition is very generous. It's a service allowing users to input queries to perform searches, usually of all websites, or at least in one language, on the basis of a query on any subject and returns result in any format in which the requested information can be found. Well, that's a chatbot with a search function, but it's also what the generalist search engine was supposed to be. So essentially, it is by accident, I would say, although in AI Act we already have a mention of this potentially is being possible, that we now include a chatbot as long as it has a search function. And this is a key thing. If you have a chatbot as it was initially rolled out without a search function, not connected to the internet, that is not a search for obvious reason. It doesn't allow you to search the web. Once you connect it with the web, it becomes search. And that has consequences. So those consequences are that you have to conduct, if you become designated as a very large online platform, an annual risk assessment, meaning every year you conduct risk assessment, you have to pay auditors. Auditors will look at it, at your compliance, and give you marks, and then the commission can make up its mind whether they like it or not. However, more consequential is something else. Is this other part that you have to also conduct risk assessment in any event prior to deploying functionalities that are likely to have a critical impact. This is what industry calls off-cycle risk assessment. So you have to do an off-cycle risk assessment anytime you introduce a feature that can have a critical impact on your risk profile. Meaning, if you don't do that, what can happen? Well, the following can happen, as it happened to TikTok. TikTok did not conduct a off-cycle risk assessment for its new program, TikTok Lite, which was rewarding users for using the service. And when Commission asked for the off-cycle risk assessment, they said, we have it, then they didn't. And then the Commission said, okay, well then we are moving to seek interim measures to stop the rollout of the feature because you haven't done your job. And sure, TikTok committed to withdraw the feature. And the reason for that is because if you fail to do an off-cycle risk assessment for a feature that can have a critical impact, the Commission can go and stop the rollout of the feature if you are a VLOP. So now think about what that means if you scale it to OpenAI. Search. So the OpenAI that is connected with search, probably every single time they do the update, they have to think about whether that can have a critical impact on their risk profile. If the answer is yes, every single time they have to do a formalized assessment, otherwise the rollout could be stopped through interim measures. Second thing is data access. So data access now, as a result, will apply. So the DSA includes a provision on data access, which allows researchers to study both on publicly available data as well as privileged non-public data through different routes. Now it basically means all of these tools, whether they're features or as a service themselves, can be studied. So Google Suggestion Tool, checked. AI Reviews, checked. Snapchat AI Chatbot, checked. ChatGPT search, all of it. All of it can be obviously studied. Surprisingly, even the provisions on recommender systems and advertising transparency can have some bite. Even, and again, it's quite interesting to think about what this would mean for ChatGPT search. For instance, things like non-profiling opt-out or advertising archive once they verge into the advertising, which they inevitably will. So all of these different provisions that were written for platforms now will extend to search, because they were supposed to apply to search, but probably there wasn't the idea that ChatGPT is the form of search. For regular services, I think the most consequential one, and this is where I'm ending, will be the protection of minors. Because protection of minors, and if you already look at the draft guidance, whatever the final form will be, is heavily also thinking about transparency about the AI use. So when minors are using the service, do they know that they are chatting with a chatbot that is actually not a genuine person? And adjustment of defaults of some of these systems. So are minors actually protected by defaults being different for minors? And this is a big focus of that recommendation. So the answer to the initial question, 2 minutes over time, sorry about that, is the ones in red, essentially the answer is we have some tool to deal with that. But we don't necessarily have tool to deal with everything. Because the common denominator here is that Google Maps, Google Search, and Snapchat are all VLOPs. This is a service, so the character AI, that wouldn't even qualify as a platform. So it would be completely outside of the scope of the DSA. So on the product level, some products that incorporate AI clearly can be, as you have seen, quite sometimes even very consequentially regulated by the DSA with some unknowns, but big parts of the ecosystem also won't be. So that's my contribution today. Looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Martin. It was really nice, and I have to say that you didn't have your Eastern Slovak accent, but you did have your cadence. So it was really good. We'll get to the questions in a second. I'll just mention to the people here that you can post any questions on Slido at #better_AI. So we are looking forward to that. Oh, we already have a question, so it's a good start. So I'll start with this question, and then I'll move to mine own as well, because I was doing quite a lot of notes. Would ChatGPT be classified as a search engine if it only searched its internal knowledge? How is it different when connected to the internet?
Because of the internet. So the definition is that you have to, that the search is something that allows the queries to be performed on all the websites or websites in one particular language. So internal knowledge certainly would not qualify.
Yeah.
So that's why the earlier features, the earlier versions that were not connected to the web search wouldn't have qualified as online search. And they couldn't have qualified as online platform for very complicated reasons, having to do with the fact that this is not a service that distributes users' information.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I wanted to ask, basically, I think that the first question that comes to mind to any company that works with AI, how will this be actually supervised, enforced, controlled, and so on? How do you see that?
Well, on two levels. Public enforcement, particularly the part about the big guys, the VLOPs and VLOSs by the commission, and then private enforcement. So you could definitely imagine lawsuits by grieving parents if minors, something happened to them as a result of AI that wasn't compliant with the DSA. I mean, this is what happened in the US, specifically with that context of that service, character AI, although, as I said, this wouldn't have been covered by the DSA. But so those are the two situations I can imagine. So private enforcement and public enforcement. Okay,
and how about the liability? Because as you mentioned, you know, there are often subcontractors that offer like this AI-based services. So
doesn't matter. It's your problem what your subcontractors do or don't do.
Okay, so you have to do oversight anyway. You can't just
you're selling the
outsource
product. You're selling the product. You have the responsibility.
Okay.
I mean, at best, you can show that you are diligent, and I guess the diligence would extend to what you could have known given what your subcontractors they tell you, but that certainly wouldn't serve as an excuse.
Okay. We have another question. Martin, did you analyze access to what data for researcher needs to be granted under the Article 40 of DSA? That's something you mentioned in the end. For example, training and testing data.
Yeah, I think this is an ongoing debate. I personally think that training and testing data both could be covered, but I'm sure companies will try to test the boundaries of that provision. So yeah, I would say that I have a generally very broad view. I think essentially everything the companies do and intimately relates to the product could, whether that's a governance sort of information about the governance of data sets or information about the data sets itself from A/B testing and other things, which is something that a commission also mentioned in its draft delegated act. I think all of those things could be part of the data access request. Now, will companies fight it? I don't know. I think there is a chance.
Yeah, I was thinking the same as well, because you mentioned a lot of transparency, but you know, all these companies like Meta and Google, they basically work on as any person working in marketing would attest with very, basically black boxes. You don't know how it works, all the recommendation systems. So I'm really interested in how it will work out, because, I mean, if the demand is for transparency and you know these recommender systems are your like business knowledge secret. So I think that's where the next question goes. Sorry, what is your opinion on how very large operations like Meta X and Google are executing the DSA amidst the geopolitical conflicts?
Oh, we're already in geopolitical conflicts.
Yeah.
I thought it's tensions or troubles at this point. Okay. I don't know. I mean, I often get these questions, but it's very hard to respond to this because people ask me, so what's the compliance level of company X? Well, I don't know. I haven't done the audit. I would have to do a lot of field experimenting and at least read studies. I can tell you specific things I've seen, they're not compliant or are compliant, or when they went out of their way to comply and where they certainly didn't. But the overall level, I think that's hard to really answer. I don't know what specifically the person online is thinking about when they say in the conflict between the EU and US. If this is about censorship debate, potentially. I don't see much of that censorship debate yet having consequences on the DSA compliance. I mean, the rhetoric obviously is making people aware of that rift, but the only tangible consequence I can think of is potentially revoking visa to people working on content moderation if they want to travel to the US. But I cannot think of specifically. So even Facebook, when they rolled out completely new program for the US, they did it for US. So Europe, to the best of my knowledge, wasn't affected by the changes. Now, of course, there could have been other things in the back that has happened in terms of the resources and stuff. But as far as I know, fact-checking is still working in Europe as it was the case before. So that wasn't rolled back. It was rolled back in the US, right? So that's a divergence. But I think they're also quite cautious because people sometimes present it as if outsourced fact-checking paid for by the platform is superior under all circumstances to community model. I think it's an empirical question whether that's the case. Because clearly it has downside, and that is the scalability. And if the community-based model could work and be more scaled, even if it's less precise, it could be still win. So I'm certainly not sort of on the spectrum of, this is definitely the best solution, this is the worst solution ever. I think it all depends how you set things up and what the results tell you works or doesn't. So I would say so far what we see is localized compliance for Europe on many of those things. So DSA, many of the obligations in the DSA have been localized for Europe and are not offered elsewhere.
Oh, okay. We will be actually talking to one of the content moderators in the second half of our evening, so we can get back to that question. Thank you for the question that I was actually asking for formulating it more clearly. And this is, should DSA mandated recommender system transparency override trade secret claims of foundation model providers? Or do we need a sui generis secrecy carve-out? Yeah,
I mean, this is a big problem that is brewing. Currently, not just in the DSA context, but also we have a recent case in GDPR, and there's a big case where I'm involved for interveners in the DMA context, and it all basically boils down to the same problem. That is, do you have a transparency mandate or some other mandate that requires transparency to work, like interoperability, and a company say, well, but that expropriates our trade secrets. So what do you do about that? Well, clearly, I don't think that it can be a trump card. So you cannot say, just because I have a trade secret, which is something that you can protect very broadly, it shouldn't trump the access to, or shouldn't undermine the effectiveness of that specific provision, whether that's interoperability or the disclosure. Now that is not to say that it has no salience. And I understand that there are certain things that, if disclosed, could be very commercially sensitive. But even for that, we have solutions which are about disclosing to trusted parties and not necessarily disclosing to, say, the researcher, the user, but disclosing to an institution, a trusted selected party. This is how we do it in some litigations like competition law. So I think there are solutions there as a middle ground, but as a starting point, I would say usually these claims are very overbroad. So of course companies are reaching for a trade secrecy, but trade secrecy attaches to anything that is not generally known in the commercial circles, and as a result has some commercial value, which is so broad that it could be so many things. So I think my starting point would be that clearly the fact that you have a mandate, whether that's for interoperability or transparency, means a lot, and that means that you can cut into the ability of the firm to hold that information secret, not necessarily to destroy the secret, because this is not a problem. If researchers get access to privileged data, they have a way how to preserve the protection of secrecy while still getting access to data. It's called NDA. So you become a researcher that has access to privileged data, but you sign an NDA that still allows you to report on the results, but you cannot share the data set. That is something that doesn't destroy the trade secrecy. So I think there are many shades, essentially, of what can be done in between, but I think the signal clearly is that some trade secrets will just be destroyed as well. I don't think it necessarily means that you can disclose all the trade secrets behind the foundational models, right? Just don't read me like that. But I think you can disclose a lot.
Okay. Can generative AI benefit from a mere conduit cache and or host liability exemption in respect of generated outputs?
No.
Okay, that was quick and to the point. So.
Because it's not users' content.
Yep. Would the binding fundamental rights impact assessment during model training blunt the DSA AI Act collision more effectively than ex post platform governance?
Would a binding fundamental rights assessment model training blunt the DSA collision more effectively than ex post? Well, I think inevitably this is what it is. It is an ex ante testing. Because if you are essentially trying to roll out a new feature and you have an obligation to submit an off-cycle risk assessment, there's no other way to do it just to conduct the risk assessment while you are testing the feature.
Yeah, before you actually
Otherwise you would
launch it.
develop the feature, then do the formal testing, hence delay, so that you are able to roll out a feature. So I think inevitably it means that you have to be testing. The question is, what's the threshold that triggers this? What's the critical impact on the risk profile? I think that's the question, and that's in the eye of the beholder, right? It depends what the regulator thinks, what a company thinks. Surely companies want the threshold to be very high, regulators perhaps lower, so we have to figure that out. But I think, in effect, off-cycle risk assessment requires that.
Okay, the very large online platform designation by the European Commission state that the online platform rules don't apply to non-platform features such as chat. How do you think that limitation works out in practice? It
doesn't apply to non-platform features like chat. Well, I think the problem is if the feature is inseparable from the designated service, how could you mitigate risks by not looking at everything else? Yep. I mean, I just cannot imagine how that system would work. So people sometimes bring it up with respect to the messaging. They said, so I think that's probably chat example. So if a chat is itself not an online platform because it is a storage in case it's operated as a sort of a cloud-based, then it's only communicated to as an interpersonal communication, hence it never becomes an online platform. How could this feature be regulated by the overall designation of, say, social media as an online platform? Well, I would pose the question differently. How can you mitigate risks on social media if you say we cannot look at the messaging? Like, how can you discuss virality of content sharing, all the problems related to it, if you don't look at messaging? I mean, I just cannot see how that would be possible. So the only way to deal with that is to say we look at everything that is inseparably connected with the designated service, and that's the risk surface. And I think the reason for that is because there are other risk surfaces or risk areas where you might have a problem that you need to mitigate that are not even on the platform. So think about how you train your employees. It's not something a user interacts with. However, no one would deny that in order to reduce the error rates on the service, of your content moderation service, you need to train your employees, and that's one of the levers you can pull, or improve your technology, backend operations, the governance. So I don't see how you could detach and just pick and choose services that do not qualify in themselves. The way I look at it is you have a service, that service is onboarded as a designated service, and as a result then, everything that attaches and interacts closely with that service is the risk surface that you have to deal with. If you detach things, so if suddenly the question of messaging, the messaging feature is not connected, so take the AI chatbot of Snapchat. If Snapchat AI chatbot was a self-standing feature, meaning you don't have it integrated in the Snapchat, then of course, DSA has nothing to tell you about that. Mm-hmm. But if it's connected, it is amplifying whatever the problem is on the service. So I cannot see how you would not look into that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the basic functions is basically just share the content of the large online platform. So it's connected, yes. Okay, let's continue. If notice and action is extended to deepfakes, what procedural breaks can prevent over removal of chilling satire and political parody, for example?
Well, so the first question is, what is a deepfake here? So is the person implying that the law says that a deepfake is illegal, or that a platform says contractually they don't want deepfakes? because those are two different things. The procedural rules should apply across the board. And actually, the very point of having them is to correct for mistakes. So if the law defines deepfakes in a sensible way, you don't have a problem to the extent that you use the tools and the tools allow you to correct the bad outcome. You don't have the chilling effect problem. In fact, the DSA put those procedural rules in place exactly to facilitate that, exactly as it asks companies to think about error rates in order to avoid over-removal. However, if the problem is the law, meaning that the law is drafted very broadly when it prohibits deepfakes, that's not a problem of the DSA, it's the problem of the law that prohibited deepfakes. Similarly, if the problem is the definition that a platform uses for prohibited deepfakes, again, the problem is not a DSA, it's maybe overbroad ban on deepfakes on a platform. So I think you have to distinguish.
Yeah, and find the balance. Can AI technology be involved in internal complaint handling system, especially in regard to Article 21 and 6 of the DSA? I see a lot of lawyer questions, so thank you for that.
Well, that's me sharing on LinkedIn. Hello, hi all lawyers. Yes, I think so. I think 26 basically means that you need to have a supervision of quality. That's my view at the moment, maybe it changes. But I cannot imagine that this would mean supervision of individual appeals in every single case. I think it means supervision of quality in general. So I think the answer is, I think yes. I mean, the context of this, there's a problem that when we drafted the DSA and said we want timely decisions on appeals, everyone thought that the problem is going to be that the platforms will decide slowly, except we got the opposite problem. Some of the platforms decide appeals within split seconds.
Okay, so
if a platform decides within a split second, you have a different question, right?
Yeah.
That is, well, was it well thought through? So hence the question.
Okay, yeah, now I see. Martin, are chatbots that are not conducting web search hosting services? Inputs are provided by users and stored, but outputs don't clearly fit into that model.
So could be, but the problem is that most of the chatbots operate by scraping as opposed to getting information submitted to them. So if you had a model, and I think the example for this was what was built on top of, I'm blanking on the name of it, but what was built on top of the GitHub. So there was an AI model co-writing the code. Wasn't it Copilot?
Copilot, yeah.
Copilot. So. And that essentially was a model that was fed with the user-generated content data that was submitted to the GitHub, which is a regular hosting service, actually online platform. So if you had that model, I could imagine that, although it doesn't really help them for the output, as the person already points out. So it's kind of not too helpful, apart from the fact that you could say maybe there's storage. But the problem is most of the models are not like that. They just scrape the data, right? They pull the data rather than get the data from the user, which is why they cannot be hosting.
Okay, could DSA transparency duties conflict with the right against self-incrimination if disclosing training corpora reveals copyright infringement? We have some very specific cases here, I would say.
Okay, that's a good question. Interesting. Haven't thought about that one. But I'm not sure you could. So I guess the assumption here is that the company would invoke the right of self-incrimination against the disclosure because they know that what the researchers are going to find is essentially copyright infringing material. It could be worse, actually. It could be worse. It could be child sexual abuse material, which surely they have some in these big data sets. So I think so it's an interesting thought. I haven't thought about it. So this is my preliminary answer. I would say, I think probably the researchers have a better position here because the reasons for the rejection of access to data do not think of that situation. They only think of a situation of undermining security and trade secrets. And since neither of the two really overlap with self-incrimination, I would say probably you would have to make a very creative argument that this is kind of not mentioned and yet still it should act as a rejection ground. So I would go for researchers have upper hand, but it's an interesting question. But then the obvious problem is that the fact that you do something illegally shouldn't serve as a ground for the disclosure, because the very point of disclosure is to facilitate that we find out that you did something problematic, right? So yeah, I'm more on the side of no.
But yeah, these are the questions actually that come up, especially with the image generation. I know Disney is now heading a huge lawsuit against unlawful usage of their
right.
their artwork.
So now with the ChatGPT designation, yeah, the data access. Yeah, interesting. See?
Yeah. How should trusted flaggers and out-of-court dispute bodies adapt when the speaker in dispute is actually a generative AI model instead of a human user?
I think it shouldn't make difference because we give user can also be a legal person. So I don't think there's an expectation there that the content has to be human created.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are some carve-outs for spam and similar, but as much as we give some through legal construct, some personhood to legal persons, if there is an account and the content was created, whether that was an AI created account or human created account, and then the content is not human generated, I don't think it should make difference. At least I cannot think of immediately of a hook for that, because it still is information, even if it's synthetic. Yeah, so probably I would go for, I don't see that that should undermine the applicability.
Okay. Does generative AI's personalization of prompts collapse the notion of an average user? And how should lawmakers adjust disclosure thresholds?
I'm not sure why it should, because so the search has a different definition of monthly active users for the purposes of counting, and what you're looking at is a unique person with the queries. So it doesn't matter if you have one person sending 20 queries and another person sending only one query. They're both active users in the last cycle of 6 months. So I think it doesn't matter how many queries you post. To the extent you can say this is a user, which you can, because you usually need to have an account on these models, I would say probably doesn't make difference. But maybe I don't understand something about the question.
Okay. Can it be that the implementation of the Act will affect the fair competition between companies if metrics of the models which are not shared at the moment will be open?
So first of all, I don't think that this means that all the metrics will be open. I think that means that they can be studied. And so that doesn't necessarily imply that if, say, ChatGPT search becomes regulated and researchers get access to the data, that researchers will be allowed to publish all the juicy information about the underlying model. I don't think that would be possible. As I said, I think part of the disclosure of data to researchers is quite likely going to be NDA for many types of data. And I could imagine that what is key for researchers to report on some of the outcomes, some of the findings, but not necessarily to report on all the underlying juicy stuff that the companies use for the purposes of their products. So I think there's a fine line which you probably can work out in the NDAs, because of course researchers shouldn't be chilled from reporting the results just because they don't look nice. But I don't think it necessarily implies that that there's kind of a disbalance now. I mean, there's a disbalance in attention, right? You become a big player, so you have a much more spotlight on you, and there's more research done on you. But that happens in a way anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll take just one last question so that we have a time for our next guest as well. So sorry if we will not be able to answer everything. We will try and make up for that in the posting afterwards. So I'm just going by the voting. So
You want to ask the audience, maybe?
We do it. We
sure.
do it actually
Afterwards?
because people wouldn't hear on the stream. So.
Okay.
Okay. So we have the question to actually Article 28 of the guidelines. Is there a risk of market fragmentation by tying age assurance to variable laws on age restriction of certain products and services?
So the background of this question is basically that the draft guidance of the Commission says that the particular services that should have age assurance, I think of, and some that should have age verification, and something of the adult sites, gambling sites, and similar, and whether that could lead to market fragmentation. I don't think so. So first of all, I don't think this really is tied with the national law. The conception behind 28 is that you will have a European answer to when age assurance and age verification should be adopted. So that means that yes, there could be variation in terms of different services, but I don't think there should be variation in terms of the member states, because ultimately 28 is full harmonization, should preempt any deviation on the national level. So Italian, French, whatever national law needs to get in line. And if we believe that 28 is the true interpretation of that full harmonization, I think that should be the answer. But Tom, if you're not sure about what I just said, feel free to follow up.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry, I'll have to stop the Q&A just so we can move to the second part of the evening. We'll save the questions and we'll try to send you the answers, so stay tuned. Thank you, Martin, for your inputs. It's been very interesting, and I have to say I'm more used to the technical questions here than to the law.
Those are also technical questions.
But I see that there's a lot of questions and not enough firm ground. So that's really great. So thank you so far. And I will be inviting our next guest here. Welcome to the second part of our evening. We have actually the second AI Awards finalists here. This is the award for the use of trustworthy AI. We don't have all of them here, which is fine for discussion, but we are of course sad that we are missing Elf AI and Medanote for their inputs on medical annotations and AI-supported diagnosis and content moderation. Luckily, we have actually our winner from this year, and that's Trustworthy AI, who is also doing content moderation assisted by AI. Tomáš Halas is the CEO, so welcome, Tomáš.
Thank you for having me.
We have Daniela Jaš. She's a team leader of data builders in Cisco Systems Slovakia. Welcome.
Thank you.
And we have Štefan Ridzi, who is a CEO of Predictive Data Science. And I will actually start with Daniela. Of course, you can post any questions on Slido on hashtag #better_AI, so feel free to ask. You're actually working with the Slido team, and so you can be posting questions about Slido, through Slido, to Slido person. And we will ask you why did you actually use AI for Slido, of course, and more precisely, I know that Cisco as a large company, it has very strong corporate rules about AI use, and so what did you actually need to do to comply with these rules, and did it actually help you with developing of your product?
We had to fight really strongly with those rules, actually. Because you can imagine, like at the beginning, when generative AI came to the world, our team as technical people, we were enthusiastic about this, and we wanted to use this technology and to provide value to our users. We had a lot of ideas what to build in the Slido product with this technology. So we started to develop our first generative AI feature into the Slido, and then we met our lawyers who who actually interpreted the Cisco rules to us the way that actually we can't release anything actually. So they saw a lot of risks in this technology, and we had to really fight with them. We had to discuss with them very heavily what are the risks, how they see it, how we see it, and so on. Well, actually, I have to admit that that time I was on maternity leave, so I wasn't the part of the discussion. So thanks to my colleague, those discussions went to the point where our points of view somehow met, and we were able to release those features. So it wasn't really easy, I have to say, and at the end we met those views, and specifically what we had to do to comply with those rules are things like we had to be transparent with our users. They are interacting with AI features, so we have to specifically say this is AI thing. Then we had to give control to our users to the outputs. So user had to consciously enter the feature and submit the generated content. Then we had to give control over those features on the company level. So companies now can decide whether they allow those features to their employees. We had to also reduce PII data from inputs of our users to the AI. And yes, those are things that we had to do actually. But at the beginning, it was really, really hard to agree on those things because our lawyers were very, very strict in this area.
Thank you for the answer. Actually, I believe that lots of people in the audience empathize with that because they had the chance to fight at some level with liability and everything. Compliance as well. So thank you, Daniela. I will continue with Stefan Rizzi. Your company is providing services to large manufacturers where you help them with maintenance procedures. Which means basically in the industry that the precision and reliability is important. So how do you actually make sure that your AI is reliable, is always producing good results, and how do you make sure about it?
Thank you for your question. As you said, we started in the automotive industry. We produce here in Slovakia a lot of cars. We have a lot of producers here. Then we started here in Slovakia. Most of them, they would like to produce their cars cheaper, effectively. And they have a lot of data from their production lines, from their devices. And then we started with this data, the time series data, and to find out the correlations between this time series data and probably the quality data at the end, and set up their production lines and set up the devices that these will work this way, that they avoid production failures. Yes. Therefore, we predict according to this time series data and autoencoder algorithms. We predict when failures happened, and we predict anomalies. Yes, we started with time series data, and for explanation of this time series data, explanation for why some, for example, vibration attributes and current attributes are in the correlations, or these values of these attributes are going this way, or the values are in anomaly sessions. To explain it, we use for this the generative AI or RAG, where we digitalized all documentation about these components, about these devices. It means manuals where are described how to fix the incidents, then of course knowledge base of the maintenance people, then ISO norms, for example, of these devices. And these are a lot of data resources, and for the combination of this, we can, yes, of course, we used the maintenance people to learn some algorithms or check some algorithms if the answers are good or not, and then we are reliable with explanation and with anomaly detections with our product. And our product is running in, we started, as I said, in automotive, here in Slovakia, in Germany, also in South Africa, but we started also with another devices like predictive maintenance for tomographs or any other rotatable components or devices.
Okay, thank you for the answer so far. We'll get to the technical side soon. I want to congratulate again to Tomáš, the winner of this year's AI Awards. I would just like to remind everyone who wants to apply, for next year. Tomáš was actually here last year as well, but they didn't win, so, it pays to apply again, don't worry. I wanted to ask, Trustworthy AI is working in the world of content moderation, which we've been actually talking about now. And the landscape of content moderation has actually changed a lot after the US presidential election. How did it actually affect Trustworthy and its plans?
Thank you for the question and for the invitation. I really strongly advise everybody to join and to apply for AI Awards, not just to win, but also to speak for such a great jury. Give you very tough questions and make you think about the trustworthiness of your AI. Regarding your question, we see there's huge difference in how the companies like big social media platforms, Meta and so on, talk about content moderation and also how to apply it. Even that legally they said that there were changes in the fact checking was done only in the US. We see that they made changes to the algorithms as they do. Since January, we see the spike in the engagement on Facebook and also other platforms on political content, which was pushed down for recent years. Since January, it goes up again, which is good for my business. I'm not sure if it's that good for the society. We generally, and not just us, like, I don't know if you know the safety net, which is like a project by paid by European Commission about contracting NGOs to monitor social media and to report awful, harmful and illegal hate speech. And they don't see it's getting better, it's getting just worse. Mm-hmm. Like the amount of content going down, which is most probably illegal content, is going down. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we definitely see the change, not to the good one. Mm-hmm. And regarding the question which actually I posted about the DSA impact on the geopolitics, DSA has become a topic for geopolitics. Mm-hmm. So now we see Vice President of USA talking in Europe about the DSA is something to push our great technology companies, big tech, and they're gonna retaliate with the tariffs and so on. So fortunately, we are seeing it's gonna be crazy for 3, maybe 5 years. Next mm-hmm. ones we'll see. And we will see also how the Europe will fight back with the DSA. Mm-hmm. Because honestly, the content we see and we moderate and we protect our brands and our users from, some of them is awful but lawful, mm-hmm. but many of them it shouldn't be done, shouldn't be on the platform at all. Mm-hmm. Like we really see literal hate speech. Like one of our clients is Auschwitz Museum. Mm-hmm. Imagine the Auschwitz Museum need to use third-party service to moderate the comments. Yeah. How crazy is that? And unfortunately, this is the way world where we live in, and it's not going to get better. And unfortunately, we don't see the impact of DSA, mm-hmm. which I had high hopes And also many people, which I spoke with in the countries out of Europe, out of US, have high hopes that at least DSA will fight back for the big tech and the social media platforms, but they don't see it yet. And I think it will not change. Still, the large platforms will not get like billions and billions of to pay for not complying.
Okay. This is actually.
I'm not a lawyer, so I still agree. I speak very frankly. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay, I see that we have questions for all of you actually for about AI awards. So actually, I'll just start from Mr. Rizzi. Was it challenging for you to join AI awards in Trustworthy AI category? Did you have any worries about your AI system being assessed by external committee?
Thank you. Yes. We are advisor for the quality auditor at the end of production line. We advise them if the check needs to be done or if some incident fix need to be done. But the maintenance or auditor need to check it. It's up to him if the incidents will be realized or not. Yes, this is a human in the middle. And yes, we are studying the EU Act, AI Act, and that we have explainable algorithms. We explain why this anomaly happened. And also, it's not a black box, for example, this algorithm. We checked the algorithms, how it works, yes, continuously. And then we repair them or we update them according to these figures.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Daniela, was it actually worse than meeting with your compliance team?
Well, actually, the reason why we were kind of confident to participate in this competition is because our criteria of the AI awards are kind of compatible with our roles, so we were kind of like we felt well about that. But still, when I spoke with the committee, there were some points that helped us a little bit how to do it even better. So, but well, I can't say that we had some worries. It was maybe a little bit of well, to have another view on our roles and systems was just beneficial for us.
Yeah.
I second that. We had no worries. We took it as a great advice we can get, generally for free. I think mostly in Slovakia, we don't value the professionals who are giving time and their resources and they know how to this kind of jury. So I took it as also from the commercial point of view, free audit, I could say, and also great people to meet and to talk about and find some points which were really good to know. So I had no worries about that. And even if honestly, I didn't expect to win for Trustworthy AI because we have such a great companies nominated. But we know that okay, either way, it will help us to get better. So I again hope more companies will join, and I'm glad that the bigger companies joined it this year, and I think that's the way how we should go.
Yeah. Thank you for your answers. How do you perceive the challenges regarding the low explainability, understandability of machine learning models? How do you cope with these issues in your AI system? Maybe I'll start with Tomáš because Mr. Rizzi just mentioned that they are very explainable and not at all black boxes. So
yes, that's kind of tough because we work with generally our end users are marketing people. So marketing managers, social media managers, maybe a little bit higher up. So, and we see the difference to the 3 years we are working. So at the beginning, when the ChatGPT came up, everybody thought that AI will solve everything. Everything is, I ask AI and it says that's true and this is how it works and this is ultimate true. Yeah. So then we need to explain, okay, but our AI, all AI are as clever as the data and everything, there is a margin of error. So there was maybe too high expectation at the beginning, and that it will understand their point of view. Now it's like people are more used to that. Okay, GPT hallucinate. It doesn't write the best email ever, so they understand that. Okay, they are more open to give us feedback on some things which they would like to have better. And generally, we have the biggest problem to set up. Okay, so what's the ground rules? What's considered hate for Trovo, and what's considered hate for you? And that sometimes is not the same. And then we need to explain. But okay, that most of clients are fine, but some clients we need to explain. But that somebody says that your building is really ugly, it's not really hate, it's a criticism. But as far as they don't say like, and we should kill you for that, it's fine. And this is sometimes like where we are. This is a more ethical question, like we need to explain that. Okay, so this is fine. So that was the biggest. And honestly, I as a AI startup founder mostly need to explain that AI is not. That doesn't know everything, and we need to have expectation management.
Okay, thank you. Daniela, do you have any comments? I mean, you worked with the basically AIs and LLMs. Did you see some, weird behaviors when you tested your product?
Well, sure. When we created those features, well, we reviewed the outputs and so on, and we saw a lot of mistakes in the models, and this was something we had to deal as well. Like our outputs are not perfect, and well, models are improving, and we can produce better results in our features. But at the beginning, it was really not perfect. So this was also part of the discussion a little bit. Are we correct in those outputs and everything? So, well, we are not doing, like, AI doesn't do the perfect job here, but we think that, like, when we allow users to have control over it, it's okay, and we can produce much risk, I'd say.
Okay, thank you. Stefan, I will still ask you because, I mean, you're on the, let's say, opposite part of the spectrum. You really don't want to have like low explainable results. So, and you also mentioned that you are using RAG, and basically you don't allow that many prompts to the user. So what would be your recommendations to actually get the system reliable?
Yes, mostly we don't have any prompt from the user, from the end user. The system, according to analyzing of this time series data, as I said, create the prompts itself and give the answer in batch line. It's not online. Yes, we also prepare the online answering, but mostly we work with the maintenance people where known the system, where known all devices, and this knowledge base is very useful for set up the algorithm, for teaching the algorithms, yes, and this way. Yes.
Okay. So basically lots of learning and supervising.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Can you share some specific examples of how end users influenced key design or governance decisions during development? Anyone?
I can. I'm not sure how is meant this question, but generally, if it is like how the product looks and the design of the product, that's generally every design change is tested in-house and then tested with some friendly users, and then it go broader, and then we check the heat maps and etc. The basic things. Regarding governance, mostly at the beginning, it was a lot of about direct feedback because we had just a couple of users, so it was direct feedback. Okay, so is this working for you? Is this new out of domain? Because we started working a lot with NGOs at the beginning. Later we started work with the companies and so on. They had a lot of out-of-domain hate. So then we were more keen on quality control and also checking, and there's a whole process on that. We don't really go fast, so we don't really go this like go fast and break things because we are in the business of trust. And once we have really bad distrust from our end user, then it's hard to convert them to the client actually during the trial. So we are maybe slower and more doing the quality control before we go further.
Any other comments on end users influencing your products?
Well, I can comment a little bit. Well, our end users are involved in the process before the creation. So our product team calls with users and we are asking them what is beneficial for you, what do you appreciate here, and what would be the perfect product, or what would be the perfect output from this. So that's how our users can influence the process of design and development.
Thank you.
Yes, we get a lot of ideas from our end users, yes, but when we offer them the price, then nobody answers them. Yes, of course, they have some ideas where we implement almost our end users are maintenance, and they have a lot of experience, 20 or 30 years. There are almost near to the pension, and they're looking for young people with the know-how, with the same know-how and to follow up within this know-how is the RAG or generative AI very good tool.
Yeah, so it's basically like a teacher. What is the most significant overlooked threat to AI systems today, and what defensive techniques can enhance resilience? Wow.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. I know lots of threats, but I'm not sure about overlooked, so.
I don't know, at most, then you make a hit, but I think, like generally speaking, is from my point of view, it's a lot about communication and social media, so take my bias for that. The data, most of the large language models are trained on Anglo-Saxon data, and that's the colonization of the outcomes of the content, which from that another AI is trained for. So we had just spoke about this event that I had one investor who was speaking. He made a term sheet in Centurio by ChatGPT, but it was using American terms which are not in our systems. Yeah. And now speaking about the content creation, speaking about the language, how the emails are written, everything. Then they are losing the culture. I don't think, maybe it's not the most significant. I generally know the most significant threat by use of AI system is the foreign influence, is the manipulation on the large scale, which already we see coming from the east side.
It's basically, yes, it's basically simplifying lots of processes that will take much longer. Any other comments? Do you have any threats? You don't have to, don't worry. Can you describe a real adversarial bypass or prompt injection incidents you observed, its root cause, and the control implemented to prevent recurrence? Oh, somebody is asking for know-how. Do you have any such experience? If not, that's okay.
We don't, because we have our own NLP classificator, which cannot be prompt injected for this.
Yeah, that's your answer right there. Do it like them. Are there any issues with securing insurance for the AI model or the business more generally? Probably talking about, the possible liability, and the problems that you can generate. You hear a lot of stuff about, let's get back to the character AI that Martin mentioned in the first article. So I'm not really sure whether you're dealing with with such stuff. So. Yeah, sorry. So sorry, we don't know anything about insurance.
Sorry.
How do you provide explanations for non-technical users while safeguarding proprietary IP or sensitive training data? This is like the combination of DSA and your job.
If I may, I feel like I'm only one who wants to speak too much. Generally, as I said, we're speaking with non-technical people using our technical product. So we're trying really simplify it. And first layer of simplifying is talking my data scientist, head of AI with the PhD is talking to me, then I'm talking to the sales, and then sales talking to people. So from 45 minutes, it come to 5 minutes, it come to a 1 minute pitch. So we try to simplify it and just generally using the general broad terms and training and so on, and quality control and so on. Thankfully, this is not a problem for us, and we try to use some easy examples.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure whether it's a good answer for this question, but like for our features, we also, like for non-technical users or people, we are creating some kind of document which describes in a non-very technical way how we deal with data and how we use data and how the systems work. So this is something which we try to give more transparency into the features.
Okay, thank you. And I will just join it with the next questions that goes in the similar vein. And that's how do you translate ethical principles like ethics, transparency, fairness into concrete engineering requirements for developers? Because that was the part of the Trustworthy AI Awards. So maybe I'll start with Stefan.
How do we mitigate risks that, as I said, our models are transparent, are open, are reviewed also within the teams. We are using also KPIs from the end user part, from the end user side, where we evaluate our models, and we also explain them this in the way that it's transparent. And also for our developers and service level specialist engineers communicate with the end users how the implementation is done. Then they can then better describe some service records or incidents on this way.
Okay, thank you. Daniela?
I'd say that those topics are not really technical ones. You know, like for developers, it's some kind of different world. But I think that at least developers should know about those topics and to have some basic overview over them. Well, to at least understand what's going on and what are the risks. And also with those discussions we had with our lawyers, it was like something we had to like meet somewhere, as I said. So at least to have an overview over that. It's important for developers, I'd say.
Thank you. And Tomáš, I mean, you're basically working in a field where it's important to like meet the technical and ethical part of the.
Yeah, thankfully we are such a small team, and that all technical teams is co-founders. So we had this discussion at the beginning, and our head of AI is expert on ethical use of AI. So I don't need to go much in details, I guess, but we had a lot of discussion. Mostly at the beginning, we were just 4 of us making the product, how to set it up, how to set up fallbacks. When we first started to moderate in the languages which we don't understand. That was like, okay, how do we set up the process for annotation, for quality control? And it's pretty complicated. There are many fallbacks, quality control again. And that's why maybe we are moving a little bit slower, but hopefully much better.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a question, and maybe we'll think about some, memorable moments. So, what's the most memorable oops moment you've had with the messy data, and what engineering fixed saved the day? If you have some stories, just share.
I have a funny story. At the beginning, we were still bootstrapping. We were not even a company yet. We trained on really aggressive data. There was a lot of hate and just not so much normal comments, I would say. And then while we were testing, it didn't go to production. We were testing. So in our data set, there was a lot of like swear word, exclamation mark, swear word, exclamation mark. And then when we put it on the out-of-domain knowledge, there was some radio station, and they was making the poll like, so what's your favorite food? And there was like goulash, exclamation mark, schnitzel, exclamation mark. And our AI thought that this is a new kind of swear words because it was so similar to what it was on the training data. So it was a funny story, and we still have this some kind of examples. But it was a long time ago. What happened? The oops moment was when come really new word. We had this in the Slovak politics, like once a year, coming with a new word. We was not used in general public at all, and then it skyrockets. And the AI, we need to do new retraining, adjusting for some of the usages. Yeah, suka, plaga. Yeah, so plague. How do you say plague? So we understood that if somebody say cancer is a plague. It's all right. If somebody says about group of people, they are plague. That's hate speech. That's dehumanization. And actually, our AI was pretty fine on that, but we fine-tuned for exactly edge cases.
Okay. Also, I don't think the exclamation mark is a problem anymore, so you cannot bypass their checks with not using exclamation marks.
One funny story, sorry, too. We have a mathematic P. Do you know the P?
Oh yeah.
Imagine how it's used, how it's used in Slovak with the C. And we had the people who are trying to bypass our detection by using
the symbol of pi. Yeah.
Symbol of pi.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I see. Any other oops moments with you?
For example, at our customers, where we realized the proof of concepts in the paint shop with very big electrical motors, we predict them some anomalies. They need to have a service, but they didn't answer to us, the service management. And electrical motor is going to the crash, and they told us, why you didn't told us about this problem. Yes, we have here reports, we sent it to you, and you didn't trust us, yes? Yes, of course, shit. We will outsource the maintenance to you.
Nice. Okay. But that was actually not a data problem. That was a people problem, right?
Yeah, trust.
Yeah. You should trust technologies more and people less. Okay. Now we have a question for Trollwall. How do you mitigate the risk of personal biases entering the annotation process? For example, annotators' political preferences, personal worldviews.
Great question, and there was more in detail. We discussed this with the jury. So generally, really to simplify, to say that we take real-world comments, real-world data, then we make some cleaning for the duplicates. We huge amounts, speaking of like tens of thousands, just for any language as a base, and that. Then each comment is annotated by at least 3, usually 4 native speakers, which are external, which are linguistic experts, which are trained for our guidelines. And each comment needs to be approved by all people with the same label, and then it goes to training. And then we have also this kind of like fallbacks. At some point, we give them back the same one. Some part of it. So if they annotate the same, because people don't annotate the same always, they are not 100%. So there's at least 20 to 40% of annotation goes like to the waste because they don't agree, and that we are done using, and that which they agree, we give them back some sample just to statistically make it significant. I really simplified, so please, data scientists in the crowd, don't quote me on that, but these are the views. And also we try to have a gender balance. 3-4 is not such a huge, but also geographic differences and age differences as much as possible. So for German, we use Eastern German, Western German, and Austrian, which also on the meetings was sometimes funny because we find out new swear words between like how Western Germans speak about Eastern Germans, and then they learn about that, and then we needed to put it in our guideline, and it can be funny story sometimes. Yeah.
Okay, this is nice. Now we have a question for Daniela. What customer-facing generative AI use cases are you running at Slido?
Well, one of the feature we have is one you can find even in a participant app when you are asking questions. So you can write your question, and you are able to improve this question with AI to improve wording or change your tone of voice or something like that. So that's basically our first generative AI features, and other features could be used by host of the Slido, and they could be found in presentation integrations, and there we can generate quiz for you on a certain topic. And other feature is creating Slido polls for your presentation, and the polls should be like generated from your slide, so relevant for your presentation.
Yeah, and I have to say, I really liked your idea of icebreaker polls at the very beginning, because that's something that takes actually quite a long time to make up if you are doing a presentation. So thanks for that. Okay, now we have another question for Trollwall. Is your product able to detect if manipulation is in data, and if so, how you define the manipulation?
That's a tough question. Generally, I wouldn't say that we are there. We are in the business to detecting which of this is manipulation, and like this more like for hybrid warfare people and guerrilla technologies, if you know. So we are catching on that a bit. But generally speaking, we are more in like how people are writing than what exactly. We got this question on some political issues, like, okay, what about if I say I don't support this or I support this? It's like, as far as it's not hateful, we don't mind, and our AI doesn't mind as well. But what we see then that also just to add, all the comments and all the text, we are mostly working in text. We are now moving to images. All the text is anonymized, so we don't know who wrote it. And we don't. Also, annotators don't see the gender, don't see any more information regarding that. So we hope that this is good enough to not have biases in that. We are more now looking for how to detect scam and spam, but it's a totally different field. But unfortunately, with the use of generative AI for dark stuff, this is what's happening on social media platforms. The scams are running so high now.
Yeah. And it's also a cat and mouse game, because it's, as soon as you can detect one, there will be others.
Yes, but honestly, I can understand how multi-billion company cannot detect scam comments like, "Hi, I want to be your friend. I'm an American soldier." Seriously, it's good for our business, but it's terrible for like to. There we use it like, okay, so we know that it's not their focus, and generally we see like. The X, the Google, and the Meta, they have their own large language model. That's where they put the data scientists, not for content moderation.
Okay. What's been your biggest aha moment about how humans actually interact with AI systems, how you expected them to? Do we have any quick answers?
Only when the end user exactly
Confirms?
Confirms what AI said. Yes.
Yes. That's actually what you're looking for. I think that's the golden standard, right, for reliability. If AI and the persons agree, then it's okay. Hopefully, not in hate speech. Yep. Okay. Which binding or voluntary frontier model commitments like compute caps, evaluation transparency do you endorse, and how will breaches be enforced? I'm not sure. Do you have anything such as that? Yeah. Not so far. Maybe next year. What drift monitors trigger post-deployment training, and how quickly can you push a patch model to production while finishing conformity paperwork? And I think this would be for Trollwall.
I'm not sure about the paperwork, but we generally update our model twice a month. But if we need it, we can do it like within a day. We train the model if there is patch needed, and that's usually happening with this new swear word, a new kind of like hate speech coming up. Then we could do it like on the fly pretty fast.
Yeah, and we have another question for you, Tomáš, and that's for content moderation. How does model act with comments in mixed languages? I think that's something.
That's great question. Because we know, and we are Slavic, so we know there are some words and some meanings in Slovak which are fine, and in Polish they are not, and vice versa. So generally we add this information like in both languages it is, but we have clients who are have a multi-language mixed comments. And actually, because it's a one multi-language model which fine-tuned on for each language separately, it can pretty much catch most of the languages pretty fine. So yeah, definitely error rate is a bit higher, but we were honestly surprised how good it is also in languages which we officially not support because we are not 100% with the quality, but it's already 98, 95-ish, I think.
Okay, thank you. And we have a very nice final question. And what's something about deploying trustworthy AI in the real world that textbooks and tutorials never prepare you for? Maybe that's a question for each of you, if you have something, some final comments to that.
Well, it's a nice question, but I don't have something specific. But well, I'd say that dealing with lawyers, no tutorials will prepare for so well.
Not with you, not with the lawyers in the audience, don't worry.
I'm also not sure about this. You need something to start with them.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's again to speak in non-technical people. Again, that. Like we got even some, last week I got a question from client if we can use Trovol but don't use AI in it. I said like, so what would they do? No, we just don't want, we cannot just say we use AI because now in our country, it was out of Slovakia, there is not good stance on AI because of the climate and because of the big tech and so on. So need to be catch on this, that like you're speaking with the people who want to have job done, but sometimes they are they're expecting too much, that AI will solve everything, and sometimes they are like, okay, AI is a scary thing. And generally with the adaptation of AI in Europe, we are more conservative than in other countries. We just talked on Friday on the panel with Americans and Indians. Indians are very, very, very further with the use of AI for general purposes. I'm not saying we should go there, but we are like more conservative in Europe, at least in marketing tech.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your participation. Thank you, Daniela from Cisco Systems Slovakia. Thank you, Stefan from Predictive Data Science. And thank you, Tomáš from Trovol AI for your participation and your final position. And also thank you everyone for watching this double edition of Better AI Meetup. Don't forget to apply for the AI Awards next year. You could, if you are a small company, just like Trovol, or big company like Cisco, everyone's invited. And thank you for participation and goodbye.